Hi, today I'm going to be talking about Consider Phlebas by Iain M. This is one of the Culture series novels by this author, and this is a specific series because they are all standalones, which is great because I'm not sure if I'm going to be continuing reading those. This book has a lot of fans, and I actually read it as a read-along, and I have one major question. What is this book about? This book has been sitting on my shelf for years now, and every time I picked it up, I read a couple of pages and then I put it down. The reason being, I usually picked it up whenever I needed to read a vast, epic space opera. Judging by the cover, yeah, that's what you would expect. But that's not exactly what this book is. This book starts with the first proper scene, not counting the prologue, with our main protagonist, Horza, being trapped in a jail on some backwater planet. This scene is one of the best scenes I've read, just because it sets up so many things at the same time and does it flawlessly. It shows us our protagonists, antagonists, their view about the world. It shows us the two sides of a war. It's all great. And if that would continue, then this would be a really good book. And there's several reasons why this book fails to deliver on certain promises it makes. So maybe let's start with the main character. So, is this book about him? Well, I certainly hope it's not, because the character starts off being written great, and it really falls fast. This character has no development. He has no path. Horza is a mercenary that has only one strong feeling about the war and why he fights in it, and it's not really convincing. I mean, it didn't convince me, and he doesn't really feel all that involved in it throughout the book. He feels more like a mercenary that has certain convictions rather than a person that fights in what he believes. So that's my main gripe with the character. He also feels bland. Those relationships he has feel bland. They even feel utilitarian. That's not a good thing to be said about relationships in a book. I just don't feel he cares about anything, really. And that may be on purpose. Maybe that's the whole idea I didn't catch, is that he's a mercenary who doesn't care about anything anymore. But it's just not a fun character to follow. While we are on other characters, they really feel underdeveloped and just two-dimensional. In my opinion, this book should follow Balveda. She's a much more interesting character. She doesn't know sufficiently much about the world outside culture, so a reader could follow her and just get to know the world better through her eyes, and it would be much more interesting. She's a much more interesting character, and she has some character development, which is much better than Horza and whatever he goes through. So we already know this book is not about characters, so maybe it's just a good adventure story. Well, there are a lot of adventures here. I cannot lie, they visit a lot of places and do a lot of stuff. It just feels very inconsequential. The locations they visit mostly are a set pieces that you want to look at, but they are not really relevant to the story. Half of the book feels like a one huge side quest. That's not what you want from most of the setup. Not one big side quest, but something that establishes something meaningful. The most blatant example of how bloated this book is in some parts is the Eaters chapter. Yes, the whole chapter. You could probably remove all of it and you wouldn't lose anything from the book. That's not a good thing to be said about the entire chapter. And Just after this chapter, there are several dozens of pages that could be cut out from the book entirely, or just shaved, maybe shave some long sentences, and the book would feel much more snappier and didn't lose much from its meat, its content. Another bad thing about it is the writing style. I did enjoy the style when it was describing vast installations, new planets, new cultures, new civilizations, some aliens. That was the style I liked because it was very descriptive, very flowery. It describes the setting well. But when it comes to adventure, that's not the language you want to use. When you have an entire paragraph, and I'm not kidding, there's an entire paragraph where Horza does about 2 or 3 steps, and then a window breaks and splashes him with shards of glass. And you could describe it in 1, maybe 2 sentences. He uses an entire paragraph, maybe half a page long, to describe these things, and this is in the middle of an action, and it's not fun to read. I would like to think this was done on purpose, but I don't think it was. It's just the fact that author uses the same flowery, long, drawn-out style to describe both the setting and the action, and it just pulls you out of the action. So it's not a well-written adventure story. I enjoyed the descriptions of orbitals and everything else, but not the action. I've said a lot of negative things about the book, and it's not all bad. In fact, there are plenty of good things about it. One of the things that I liked about it, and what I like in science fiction in general, is the fact that it's exploring big concepts. I always enjoyed this the most about the science fiction genre, is you can build as big of a set piece as you need, and you can introduce as advanced technologies as you can, and then you can use them to explore some deep and complicated concepts, like general artificial intelligence, like artificial worlds, like developing a different kind of space culture. Humans will evolve on other planets and artificial space constructions according to the rules of these worlds. So there will be some genetic drift among humans. That's really cool, and that's touched upon in this book. So for that, this book is pretty good, and the only problem I have with it is that it's far too few. You could probably shave a lot of adventure and action from this book and just explore more of those concepts. Another small thing I enjoyed is the fact that the author tries to put in humor into this book. There's not a lot of it, but the most obvious example is ship names. I mean, the Hand of God 137, the first ship we are introduced to. That's a pretty cool concept, and the reason why it's 137 is even more fun. And it uses to establish a setting and explore the world, all in one simple naming choice. Not to mention names of the culture ships. These are sometimes really cool. Ends of Invention for a ship name for civilization that's super advanced and is all about inventions. That's pretty cool. So in the end, maybe I am misjudging the book, or maybe everyone is misjudging the book, and it's really a big concept book that is only masked as a bad adventure story. I don't necessarily think so. I think there's another option that not a lot of people consider. And Consider Phlebas is, in my opinion, an exploration of the world at different scales. And it shows in several scenes throughout the book. It shows how the author zooms in on particular adventure and then zooms out to describe a situation about the war, and then zooms in to show Horza grabbing a small insect and showing the consequences of it, and then zooms out to show a giant destruction of an interstellar installation, and then zooms in on a planet, and then zooms out and shows a time span that passed, and describes how thousands of years shaped a certain place in the world. And in the end, that's what I think the intent of the author was, is to show how scale and frame of reference affects how we judge a situation. And it's really amplified by the appendices at the end of the book. Tell me if you agree with it. And for me, I give this book a 7 out of 10. You can read it, it's readable, but there are better books that do similar things better, or at least more compact. Thanks.